name is Rob Widger. I am the Educational Director for Shape Robotics, and I'm here today to talk about my experiences of STEM education. My background is originally in teaching. I spent 7 years teaching in the UK before becoming an ICT advisor, working with teachers all over the authority that I was working in, before writing a book on Lego and joining Lego to become one of their educational consultants. And I worked with them for 15 years on their robotics, using robots in the classroom, and then came over to Dubai as a training manager for a company before going back into teaching and practicing what I preached, what I talked about when I was at Lego Education. And I worked at a school for 3 years in Abu Dhabi as a robotics stroke STEM teacher, where we used robots in the classroom all of the time and had great fun there. And then I joined Shape Robotics back in March 2021 as their education director. And I'm actually here today in Romania and actually in a STEM lab filming, creating resources for teachers in Romania that are being introduced to the STEM lab concept. We call it Smart Lab in Romania, but schools in Romania are getting a smart lab with equipment in, lesson plans, content and training to start introducing that to their students here in Romania. So as I say, my background is teaching. I've been teaching for many years I've been in education for near on 30 years now, just under 30 years as a trainer, teacher, writer. I worked on the development team of the Mindstorms product as well. So I've been around the STEM arena, the environment for a number of years now. For me, teaching STEM or having STEM in school is about trying different things in different ways. Also giving students freedom to experiment as well and try new things, but also not afraid of getting things wrong as well. So, you know, my philosophy of STEM is to do things differently, to give children those different opportunities. And if you look at the origins around, you know, developing and making science, maths, technology more exciting in the classroom, more engaging, for me, the STEM classroom allows that to happen. It should be a place where the teacher isn't always leading from the front. Actually, it's the students leading. It should be a place where there isn't always one answer. There's a number of answers. It should be a place where a safe environment where things go wrong, and you as a teacher with the students work out solutions to overcome, you know, things that don't quite work out when they're designing or when they're trying things out in the classroom. And I think that's really important as well. And for me as well, it's also stepping back as the teacher. It's stepping back as a teacher and saying, you know, especially with robotics, that your students probably are going to know more about some of this stuff than you are. So, you know, one of my experiences recently teaching in Abu Dhabi, where I was using robots in a classroom environment, I didn't quite understand one of the aspects of Python, and one of the boys in my class said, "Shall I show the class?" And it was like, absolutely, come on, show the students, show me, teach me. So for me, it's also as a teacher, stepping back and giving those students those opportunities to shine as well. Because, you know, we live in a world now where if we take a smartphone, my daughter knows more about smartphone technology than I do. So actually, if I've got experts in my classroom, bring those experts in and use those experts as well. So for me, it's those aspects of STEM education that, you know, it's a different way of teaching, it's a different way of learning. It's not about the teacher at the front of the classroom. It's about trying out new things. It's about exploring different avenues. It's about failing as well. I think in education, we don't help children learn those skills needed and those strategies needed to overcome failure. And STEM classrooms allow that because you are trying new things. You are trying different solutions in different groups. So those are the aspects for me, is that we're trying something different. we're trying a different way of teaching and learning. And, trying that different way of teaching and learning in a school where, much of teaching is very similar, that's so engaging for the students. And I think for me, that's what STEM education is all about. Using robots in the STEM classroom is all about, for me, finding the right robotic solution. I think historically, too much time has been spent with robots actually in the building phase of a lesson. So in a one hour STEM lesson, for example, 30 minutes or 35 minutes is spent building this robot. And for me, historically, what that means is the key areas of design, which is analyzing, evaluating your work, redesigning, and coming up with a better solution than your first attempt, gets lost. And I think finding the right robotic solution is really important, and between that balance of doing some building and actually having that STEM or design lesson in STEM that covers all areas. And I think finding solutions where build time is reduced, and I joined Shape Robotics because you can build a robot in seconds and minutes, not in 30 minutes. So, when we do our robotics lessons, more time is dedicated to all aspects of design, not just the actual building. And I think finding the right robots or right robotic solution in your classroom is key. So that time management can be used really well. The other thing as well is, if you look at jobs outside and you look at research outside, half the jobs in 15 years' time are going to be automated. So learning robotics, learning how to code is such a big part of students' futures that, it's almost, for me, we must be doing these things so that we are preparing children when they leave to go out into the workplace. And doing it in a STEM environment where we can set challenges, we can set real world problems, for me, just gives those skills, or those students, those skills to be able to go out into the world after they leave education, ready for the challenges, or at least be partly ready for the challenges. So for me, finding those tasks and giving really good real world challenges, real world tasks that children can solve, with a robot system that is relatively quick to build in the time that you have, will prepare those students for the future. And it'll also make your lessons much more balanced. And that, for me, as a robotics / STEM teacher, for me, that's been the biggest challenge. If I look at the other kits I've used, or if I look at what I've used when I was teaching, that was my biggest evaluation. My biggest takeaway when I left teaching back in March was that we need a solution where you're not building for so long. For me, the advice is look at solutions where building isn't as long. You're not spending lots and lots of time. But also find a robotic solution where, if you want to build and you want to do complex design, that ability is there. So that is something, and this isn't a sales pitch for my company, but have a look at how you can do longer builds and shorter builds as well. So for me, that's key. And also giving students the opportunity to learn multiple languages, or at least be exposed to multiple coding languages as well. Because, if you go into industry, if you go into different industries, there will be graphical languages, there will be text-based languages as well. So giving students that opportunity to find what they're good at and what they're most comfortable with, for me, is a great aspect of exploring in the STEM lesson. Okay, so the question asked was about the 3 top resources. And probably for me, I'm here in Romania working in one of our smart labs. So, we are building our STEM lab around three key resources. And for me, being a robotics expert, if you ask me about a STEM lab, of course, robotics would be one of those resources, because, as I said in my last question, so many jobs are going to be going to an automated way that that's going to involve maybe some sort of programming. It might involve some sort of machinery or robots. That it's key that we do expose children and let them learn about this technology. So for me, robotics is definitely one of those that would be at the top of my list. It's also one of my passions. So of course I'm going to say that as well. For me at the moment, I'm writing content that is basically based around three core products. So I'm writing, lesson plans around robots using VR technology, and then also using 3D printing. So for me, at the moment, I can see those three areas being really important in a lab for me as a STEM stroke robotics teacher, where I've just created a lesson. I might as well talk about the lesson I'm just created and been working on. Robots are used to be sent down into pipe work underground. Instead of digging up pipes that cost lots of money and it makes the town look terrible, we send robots underground to look for problems and to solve those problems. So I've just been creating a series of lessons where we design a robot to go through a pipe, which we printed off. It goes through the pipe. The children have to look at the problem through the VR glasses with 360 videos, so they can actually see 360 videos of actual sewer pipes and see all the problems, the tree roots coming through and the fatbergs and all the fat deposits as well. And they have to then, solve how can they actually clear that debris? How can they clean up that mess? And that's when the 3D printing comes in, where they design some sort of attachments for the robot to go into the pipe with the VR technology and be able to clean that pipe. So for me, it also, and again, I'll change the question a little bit for me, because the products are great, but you still need the right content. You still need the right lesson material that brings all the content together, because I feel too much as well that STEM labs at the moment, you do one thing or you do another thing. I want to bring the technologies together so that, when you come into a lab, you're utilizing the majority of the lab at once. You're not just taking one thing from a shelf and using it. You're actually bringing in all the different technologies into a real world problem. So for me, those three products probably at the moment would be the ones that I would say for me are the most important when I'm teaching, because those are the ones I'm writing content on, and I can see really strong links that make impact in the classroom. So for me, I would say the robots, the robotics, VR technology, and the 3D printing, and all those actually link together in lessons where you're using those technologies at once. For me, coming into the lab, as a teacher, whether you're a science teacher, maths teacher, STEM teacher, robotics teacher, I also think, and I'll rephrase the question a little bit, my first real piece of advice is get rid of worksheets. Okay, that's my first bit of advice, is get rid of them. Okay, for me, and this is my own experience, there's nothing worse when you're seeing children engaged in a real world problem, they're designing, they're building robots, they're bringing in different technologies, and then suddenly they're given a worksheet, and you see that level of motivation, that engagement, they just go, really? So we're in this lab. We're in this lab with cameras. We've got lots of technology in here. Use that technology to record learning. Use that technology. Instead of writing a report, do an interview like we're doing now. It's not by chance we're doing an interview. Why? Because people like watching interviews rather than most people like watching rather than necessarily reading. So we do these different ways of communicating information, ideas, results. Do that with the children as well. So, instead of them writing a report or get them to do an interview, get them to do a podcast. With the paint on the walls that you can write on the walls, get them to graffiti. I've seen some great ways of reporting what they've learned and evaluating their work by writing on the walls with a whiteboard marker. And then from a teaching point of view, less STEM lessons will become more relevant as well when subjects talk to each other as well. So when departments talk to each other. So, what have maths teachers been doing last term in their maths classes? Because for me, also the STEM lab is about applying what students have learned, and actually applying, what have you been doing in maths last week? Well, I've been doing geometry. Okay, let's design a robotics activity where they take their knowledge of geometry and angles and inner out angles and outer angles, and then they do a real world task that's based around their geometry knowledge, and the same for science. What have they been doing in science that week? Have they been doing fair testing? Can I do some fair testing in the lab as well? So for me, it's that communication between departments and giving opportunities for students to actually practice what they've learned in their maths classrooms, in their science classrooms as well. So for me, that's really important, is to put into practice those concepts that those students have been learning in lessons as well. And, in some schools, you'll have a STEM teacher. In some schools, teachers are going to come from other departments as well. And I think that's really important that maths teachers, for example, work with the STEM teachers, get confident in the lab, in the technology, how to carry out or how to run maths activities in the STEM lab. But also, and this is the other piece of advice, is that if technology in your STEM lab isn't being used that week or that day or that, get that technology out into the maths department. I've got robots here sitting here. I've got one of my robots here that once the students have learned how to code it, once they've learned how to build a model, that doesn't take that long. And once the maths teachers come in and experience the lab as well, and maybe done a few maths lessons in the lab as well, if technology is not being used, book it out and take it into a maths department and use it, because otherwise you see equipment sitting on shelves. And that's one of my big passions, is I don't want to see labs with technology in cupboards. When I was working in my school in Abu Dhabi with Lego, for example, we had every Lego kit, but within 6 months of working there, I was the elementary department or the primary department, they had all the elementary robotics in their classrooms on trolleys, and they were using it in classrooms, because that's what we want. This is a focal point. It's a great space. It's a great learning space, but we also want to see that equipment being used in everyday lessons. Because there's nothing better in a maths lesson than to practice what you've just done, not on paper, but with a robot. What a great way of reinforcing learning, of demonstrating your understanding, than giving them a robotics task that's based around a maths problem. I give geometry as one example, but, one of my favorites is looking at, what's the one, the different triangles and going around and being able to do trigonometry. Sorry, that was it, brain cells. I saw some great trigonometry lessons where they could do it on paper, of course, but the maths teacher said, let's try a robot. And I went in and I was impressed, so impressed, that it wasn't even the maths teacher that created the lesson, by the way. It was the students that created the lesson on trigonometry. And it was so good that I went in and saw that actually Lego adopted it in one of their future robotic solutions. It's actually in their software on trigonometry, and that was inspired by some students saying, let's try this in a maths lesson. And again, that I come back to that learning philosophy, that that STEM philosophy is, try new things. Students are going to come up with some fantastic ideas of using all of this technology, not just in STEM lessons and in STEM labs and things, but in everyday lessons. And us as teachers, for me, I just want to embrace that, and sometimes it goes wrong, of course. And when it goes wrong, we look at it and go, we tried it, what happened? We evaluate. When it goes wrong, we evaluate it. And I always come back to, how many failed designs and failed attempts did the Wright brothers have when they built the aeroplane? Did they fly the first one they ever designed? Was it, no, innovation and is all about trying things out, and when it doesn't quite work, evaluate it and try it again and try it again. And that in education is something that, us as teachers, we're getting better at. We are getting better at it, and we're realizing that children need these opportunities. But just embrace it is what I say to teachers. It's a wonderful resource we have. STEM education is a wonderful concept, and it's embracing that concept and letting children really explore it, and stepping back without fear as well. I'm not always going to be the focal point of knowledge in my classroom in a world where children are growing up with technology. I'm not. I'm 50 years old. Okay, there are things I don't know about 3D printing. There are things that I don't know about robotics. But I love it when the students teach me something. And I'll finish on one thing. My example of that is I set children a design task of building a robot, and this was bringing maths into the lesson as well, of climbing the steepest slope. And it was great. I was expecting 60 degrees, 50 degrees. And two boys came up to me and said, I want to go higher. I want to do 90 degrees. And I was like, okay. And all I said to them was, because then I had one of those moments. I was like, okay. All I said was, look at roller coasters. And these two boys went away and they designed a robot that gripped the two sides of the table or the ramp. And they came back and said, what about this? And this robot not only went up 90 degrees, they inverted it. And I looked at that and went, wow, I couldn't have done that. I couldn't have done that. They did that. The only words I said was, and the only thing that could come to my mind at the time was roller coasters. They went away and researched it, came back within one lesson. They designed a robot to do that. And that's what it's about, us as teachers. We're not necessarily always going to be at the front teaching and imparting our expertise and our knowledge. It's about giving children those opportunities to lead as well. And for me, that was one of my most enjoyable lessons. It wasn't me leading at the front. It was these two boys that had just gone off and researched everything, about roller coasters and came back and showed me. And for that, that's what, for me, is what STEM education is all about.